Humbleness is a virtue. And there are many humble games out there in the video industry. Stardew Valley, The Sims, Minecraft, Animal Crossing, Pikmin. I'm gonna bet the new Tamagotchi Life, Living the Dream that's coming out this April is gonna be one of those games. But probably one of the most humble games I've ever played has been around for so long. Yet we all play it. And that game is, well, let's see here. If anyone organizes this theme, yep, you got it. Woohoo! Yeah, it's Tetris, everybody. Everybody knows how to play Tetris. Everybody has fun playing Tetris. It's a game where even after all these years, playing it is still addicting and still fun. But that got me thinking, what are the story of Tetris? What are the story of this game? Well, you know what it's about being humble? This story is anything but humble. Because, to be honest, Tetris is a weird game. And its story may be even weirder. A story that involves Soviet Russia and one man's journey to escape and many illegal dealings. But on top of it all, it's a story of underdogs. Greetings, everybody. I'm going to toss 45, or toss my 45. You're watching the Home Podcast, and today, well, it's the history of Tetris.
Okay, Smokey, roll 'em.
It's showtime.
Everyone's mad.
Our story begins in Soviet Russia with a man named Alexey Pajitnov, or Pajitnov. There's been some debate on how to pronounce his name. From what I've gathered, his name is pronounced Pajitnov. However, I've also heard arguments for Pajitnov. As I can video, I'm gonna go over this book name of Pajitnov and not Pajitnov. It just comes more naturally to me. If I mispronounce it, I am completely sorry. So if I do. Anyways, let's begin, okay? Alexey Pajitnov was born on April 16th, 1955, and he lived with his parents, both of which were writers. His father was an art critic, and his mother was a journalist who wrote about newspapers and film magazines, which was a very frowned upon position in the Soviet Union. He woke up when he was 11 years old. Pajinov's parents divorced. For several years, he lived with his mother in a one-bedroom apartment that was owned by the state. She was eventually able to move into a private apartment when Pajinov was 17. He later went to study mathematics and mathematics communication in the state. It's where he has a fandom for some computing. When computing equipment, researchers would write a small program for it to deal with computers. Compared to that, this became his excuse for making games. Computer games were fascinating to him because they bridged the gap between logic and emotion. However, trying to get a game through the Iron Curtain was virtually impossible. So, for one, the Iron Curtain was very closed off from the rest of the world. Technology was way behind. So there was no way to get a game out like this. Two, and most obviously, was the communist regime. I mean, if you guys are very much aware, the Soviet Union is a communist country through and through. So of course, game internet cutting was virtually impossible. Okay. Searching for inspiration on how to get a game though, he remembered a game called Pentominoes. A game where you would use shapes to put down a tile and spin. He used a computer called the Electronica 60. The Electronica 60 is this old brick computer that was outdated even by the 1980s. This computer was so old that the Commodore 64 that was in the US, it was in America at the time, was leagues ahead. And if you know the Commodore 64 or anything, you know it's outdated as hell. Okay? The Electronica 60 had no graphics instead, so he had to figure out games. Eventually, he found an idea with called the Pentominoes and decided to make a game using them. It worked, but there was an issue. It was boring. There was no flair or no flavor to the game. It was just boring. So Alexey added things. He made the Pentominoes move and rotate, but this created another issue. The Pentominoes the pieces did not fall naturally, and when you found a line, it stayed on the board. Where if you found a different line, it also stayed on the board. The game had a definitive end, making it not fun. Tetris is okay. Alexey and his team decided to finish it up. Instead, they changed things up. They changed the normal pentamino number to be 7, and changed the tile arrangement from 5 to 4, thus making it a lot easier for people to get through. For the manufacturing process of Tetris, or in case manufacturing, just in their offices, they made sure to make it work. Alexey was at least he gave the sound that he was just busy doing stuff to keep the idea down that he was actually developing something else. Of course, being that he developed at the Dresden Sciences, it was technically still government property. So, yeah, it was still technically owned. They had to be careful not to get it leaked out into the communist government. But to make sure things so. But then Alexey had a revelation. What if the pieces just disappeared? The idea popped in his head, and it made a great idea. He then thought of a name. He could paint the shape he wanted to paint for a thing called Tetris. It was a combination of two things: tetra, which is the Greek word for 4, and tennis, which was Pajitnov's favorite sport. The first game of Tetris was completed around 1984 or 85. There's no real date, but it's said to be there. Okay? Tetris was actually supported to the IBM computer, which had a higher escalate than the Electronica 60 during its time. However, there really wasn't much of a way to get. It wasn't until Alexey met a 16-year-old prodigy named Vadim Gerasimov. Again, I'm maybe mispronouncing his name. These are all Russian names, and I am not a native Russian speaker. Like, as you can probably tell, I can do the accent, but I cannot do the pronunciations correctly. Okay. Look, the games, the idea, and was imported to IBM PC. Gerasimov imported color and the magic stuff. There. Another kind of guy I had out a long time too was a man. Was a man named Dmitry Pulaski. Pulaski, who helped him do soundboard. Probably that's covered greatly the Dresden Computer Center before spreading across Moscow. Some of these copies did unfortunately get destroyed. However, some of them leaked out, and that's where we get to other areas. Under Soviet law, intellectual rights could not be protected, okay? And state organizations, Electronica, or ELORG, for short, because the original name is far too damn long to get through that idea. Yeah, had a monopoly on exported runs of software. By this time, Pajitnov had arranged for the Tetris for 10 years to ease legal troubles. As a result, Alexey couldn't really sell Tetris for profit. Nonetheless, Pajinov's manager, Viktor Barajman, liked Tetris to some opportunities for it. And in 1969, he sold a copy to the Ski Institute of Computer Sciences in Budapest, Hungary. And a person who was living there at the time, Robert Stein. Robert Stein was a British person who had his own company called Agile Software in the UK. He was licensing games from Hungary to the UK companies. Encountering Tetris, he was confused. When he saw the games, he was even more confused. "What the hell is this?" he asked. "Oh, it's just a game, nothing more." Stein was intrigued. Within minutes of just playing one round, he became hooked. He saw this game was addicting. Well, he wasn't a gamer himself. He saw the potential of this game and asked if he could blow a choice. However, the person who was playing it earlier said it's not a game. Technically, it's not Hungarian. Stein had to pay up with the Soviets to get down. Stein and sent telex translated to English to Russian. Disclosed that Pajitnov, who had sent Russian, and the same on his response. Despite this attempt, Stein attempted a response as granted him a license to publish on Tetris. Okay? Meanwhile, Stein pitched the idea to Jim McCarthy of Microsoft, a UK software company run by magnate Robert Maxwell. Maxwell was inspired by his bosses and his peers as an excellent supervillain. Okay? He was tall and brutish. He was wearing an ill-fitting suit. He reeked of cologne. He had a boorish attitude. And he had connections to the Soviet Union that made him a perfect hangout for this area. Okay? He spoke with an irritating lisp and had many weird connections that made it illegal. One of these was to founder under Nikolai Gorbachev, who was a leader. Being that he had these connections, he didn't okay? But McCarthy was skeptical. He consulted Phil Adam, home of a U.S. sister company, such an Harvard, for his input. During overseas, Adam played Tetris for hours and encouraged McCarthy to accept an offer. Though still cautious, McCarthy agreed to allow himself licensing rights for Europe. Adam would handle the rights for the US and Japan. Stein gave the company at least £3,000 to get it. Okay, £3,000 is what this was roughly 1984 money, but £3,000 would be in that kind of money. If I were measuring from US dollars, it would US dollars was just giving me here. I'm just trying to calculate the amount of pounds we have. So yes, right here would probably be $4,025 worth for the US dollar. If you guys want to help out, okay. Even though negotiations with Johnston were at a standstill, they seemed to get down. Gilman Louis, CEO of Central Harbite, sought to exorcise the Soviet organizations, marketing the first time properly when the Soviet was there, and what himself. Tetris was commercially released on the IBM PC. However, Central Harbite even got license to port to other types of PC. To the Russians, this meant just generally just PCs like the IBM or Commodore 64. But to Stein, he misread that document, saying that the PCs were meant for anything that has screen. This included home consoles, and decided to get into the inner workings, hoping that the consoles would also be fair game. The idea of having a fair game console was a good idea, but this was still during the time when the US and Soviet Union was still at the Cold War base. So having a game that was coming from the Russian area didn't really seem to make games. With Mitchell Typons, the clock was ticking. So However, Moscow kept throwing in the negotiations. Stein and Maxwell had on signed messages saying that they wanted this game out now. Stein had to know the negotiations. $10,000 from the front, with $75 million of one money made from Tetris. Pajitnov then, with a vague response. They were ready to make a deal. Stein kept on pressing for partial payment for Commodore computers. The Soviet regime intervened in negotiations. Academy-Soft, publishing licensing group of the British Academy, would have enough fun with negotiations. Academy-Soft insisted to board Tengen on the IBM PC computer Tetris. I agreed. Tetris would be negotiated at a later time. It was 1987 now. There was still no contracts. So how about Microsoft versions of Tetris? The rights were already secured. But Stein grew frustrated. Who exactly was handling those rights on the Russian side? Or so he thought. But in pen and paper, Microsoft, the Hardbyte seemed legit. Was the Russians on the Russians. In 1987, he sent another telex message to Moscow, mentioning that Microsoft, Hardbyte, Gametrace, VMPC in the respective regions, North America and Europe. Let's go nowhere. Stein to the deal, Hardbyte and Microsoft. But they had to get the Russians to sign that dotted line. However, to get the Russians to sign the dotted line, that was a bit different. All Stein had told him, Russian companies moved forward with Tetris. The marketing was tough. Tetris was a good game, but it was unlike any other game in existence. There was no plot or story. The graphics were not cutting edge. Phil Adams, one of them, noted that Tetris was just a game being commercialized for North America. Why not use that to advantage? Tetris would be good as a exact game from the Soviet world, others than Curtain. It would surely tap into popularity in the Soviet Union. The game was completely reprogrammed from motions to Russia. Developers NJ Tengen Bowser's Cathedral, Lenin Stadium, and Mayday celebrations in Red Square. Celebration music. Two Rust. Russian village. Playing the He's arrested and charged with hooliganism. Like that was a thing. Wrong make it in terms of majors. Showed up Will said poached. It was orange night. Dying getting another text message about another VJ show. This one in ELORG, intentionally Asians go through them. It was ELORG. Now, I told you about ELORG. ELORG was our free technology, here's software. ELORG was someone which was the Academy of Sciences were creating programs, including artificial intelligence software. Pajitnov, the program so internationally. Pajitnov usually launched in Tetris. Microsoft had trouble getting since CDD or Dime. This ELORG were furious. Pajitnov had no rights to get into software licensing deals. The brand would be handed over to them immediately. What they learned was astounding. A teacher of sciences was negotiating games field for a video game. They had no idea that this thing was even a game in the first place. How the hell would they know that? How would they know it's being distributed? Beats himself. So rest. Something nothing haven't signed yet. ELORG took all negotiations away for them. But Stein to come to Moscow and explain himself. Right, Stein said he felt like he was in interrogation. ELORG didn't trust him one bit. When Tetris asked, "I had no idea your fucking company existed," he said. Now would jeopardize everything. Seemed like a bold comedy. and back and forth, and it can be a never-ending game of tennis. All games. Stein won rights to all home computer systems, not just the IBM PC, to negotiate. Nothing had been signed. Tetris moved forward. On January 9, 1998, Spectrum Holobyte released Tetris for $34.95. It came in a red box with Tetris written in Russian, bold yellow characters. It stood out from the games. The Russian marketing worked like a charm. Spectrum Holobyte's 100,000 copies in its first year. In the UK, Microsoft sold fewer, but still a sizable amount. But again, in the Russian iconography from the version, views were glowing. To read one review, Tetris is so simple to learn and memorize forgotten notes afterwards not. But so intriguing started, you'll be spending many hours on the computer screen. So many plot. Hatcher Empires in the United States. Dennis Lynch, Chicago Tribune. As computer games go, it's simple and addictive. There's a loxy and explosions and mayhem to us. American entertainment software. Then Soviet software immediately saw something else. Tetris fever enveloped the West, home and at work. Holobyte Bluesky game. Blank command prompt. It was a resounding success. Stein was nervous as hell. Shins was still in massive limbo. Holobyte and the soft game to omitted certain forms. Finally made in 1988, 4 months after Tetris certificates, ELORG and Stein have finally made a deal. Software creates Tetris in computer systems. Tries to port Tetris to, quote, different types of computers. Stein, but this one game consoles as well. ELORG received amounts of royalties on every game sold. Stein, their sigh of relief. Microsoft telling them that the deal was officially done. And so the came by the rights should that they was eminent as well. When their sub-licensees, we turned to a vicious battle over who could do what with Tetris. But say that those deals were good would be a bit of a misnomer. Tetris was an exotic game for the Soviet Union. These deals were illegal still. January 1988, going to a trunk show in Las Vegas. Followed by Phil Adams, just to run line of attendees. Was Henk Rogers, owner of Japanese infrastructure bulletproof software. Rogers was born in the Netherlands, but he grew up in the US. While in college, in Hawaii, he loved a Japanese woman. He moved to Quebec, Japan with her. And formed bulletproof software. By Dungeons and Dragons, Henk Rogers, Electronics, based RPG, which Japan had never seen before. In 4, it was based in game in Japan. In 5, we moved with the Nintendo Famicom and the game for system. She was over at Board Game Go. He set a meeting. Roger made me go for the Famicom. She instance of 30 million yen, so $300,000 to make the game. With a mess, Rogers moved Nintendo cash and be an official Nintendo licensee. He made more and more publishing. He included trade shows, this game to bring back to Japan. Third, live playing Auction game from Russia. Tetris. We could show what the hell it was. Tetris was Maria's name and show. And then Parks were graphically exciting. This game was totally different thing. I wanted to play it because it struck some basic chord. Couldn't stop playing. After going through at least more than 5 times play, Rogers was convinced Tetris was a game he was looking for. But seeing these programs require little to no translation. Game movie CEO Harbyte was going to Japan to shop the game. It was the ASCII Corporation, which is publishers in Japan. They said no, Tetris. It was too retro. They lost. What's Rogers' game? Henk Rogers, who software to publish Tetris, and for just about every platform imaginable. Rogers also was selling charges as royalties on every game can be sold. No plans being Tetris' market. Rogers seemed more than willing to Tetris strategy. When John McConaughey dropped to see the surprise. Couldn't have the home console played by his hand because this was already sold. The buyer was Atari Games. This game was Tengen. That was Atari playing the DC version of Tetris and reverse engineering it to play on their systems. It became Dwarko talked dreams to grab the rights quickly. Pigman's words until he's got for a hell of a steal. Trade rights and America though trade rights to update of their game Asteroids. No royalties of cash to consider. He was furious, but there was little he could do. Soft the Maxwell with Maxwell, and Maxwell had more power thanks to Soviet Union use. And PC rights have to contact Atari Games. And to them rights though, Atari said no. On the 3rd, California camped out in the Atari Games parking lot. He reinforced to talk to the president, Hideki Nakajima. And Nakajima was there and made a sales pitch. Eventually, Nakajima agreed to a meeting. After dinner, the two businessmen talked ideas. When the current owned arcade rights, he sold those to Sega, but he was willing to sell the console rights to Japan. Jima didn't care much about the rights to Japan, so it was on the West market, but cheap. He was going to cough up $300,000 from his bank just for console rights. Confident the game would be a hit. However, Japan sales were low. Both software to 4,000 units. Rogers and Miyuchi hoped he could help push the game. And he shares two designers, Shigeru Miyamoto. So days later, Miyamoto just was a good game. Yes, Miyamoto. Just why joining with this one. And accountants all playing it. With that, we showed Tetris universal appeal. Pushing scales of Tetris. Orders increased 1,000 to 100,000 within that time. In 1988, Bluetooth spots where Tetris for the Nintendo Famicom became the best-selling game so far, 3 million copies. Another branch, which became a tree of sublicensing and sub-licensing. On one division, Robert Stein's deal with ELORG. And that deal was crumbling. But how is it crumbling? Well, stay tuned as we look into more into Tetris' history after the break.
And there's another thing, Mikhail. The kids these days. Aye. Tetris, Schmetris, all the time it's Tetris they want to play. And it's not just in Russia. All over the world it's Tetris. Whatever happens at Unicycle, at the ball. In a changing world.
Welcome back. I just said that Stein's deal with the Russians was now in jeopardy. Well, you might be asking, what the hell does that mean? Well, everything was about to collapse. Okay? In 1988, Nintendo was on top of the video game industry world, having 7 million entertainment systems that year. Industry experts predicted that Nintendo games was larger than all types of new software. And they weren't done yet. And the wings of Nintendo in Japan was the new system, the old Game Boy. America, the standard package of Tengen games with a game. Which one? In December 1988, Henk Rogers was meeting with and Manu Alkawa, who was in Redmond, Washington. In Washington, he says of Tetris. If you include the Mario, Game Boy will be for little boys. But if you include Tetris, the Game Boy will be for everyone, he said. Alkawa was intrigued. He heard about the success of Tetris for the Famicom in Japan. Tengen released Tetris for the entertainment system in North America. No rights was still up for negotiation. Rogers was more than happy to help. Wins a this deal. Eventually, Tetris was a packet title. Actually, when Tetris sites in Japan, Roger Stein was the man he talked to. Roger Stein inquired about the handheld rights Tetris. He offered $1 million in advance. Stein, who didn't want to have all arcade rights, was also feeling from Microsoft asking for their handheld rights. Eventually, Washi Ben's responses. His Russians didn't back to us. But Stein would hit a roadblock. Someone in licensing ELORG wasn't getting paid. The new director, Nikolai Belikov, was sorting out the tests. Belikov, a large man with a reputation of being cutthroat, Patrick noted him as an excellent actor. He was a worthy negotiator. Belikov returned ELORG's contract, which was signed in 1988. It promised payment for 3 months. Payment was 3 months late. Stein was stuck. Ubisoft and Rogers wanting handheld rights on both ends. Unlimited portions of Tetris were already showing up on the market. He figured his chance to start it out was to fly to Moscow and meet with Belikov. Meanwhile, Rogers felt ignored. He grew suspicious of Robert Stein. Not only that, but he got when Louis Vinton Hardbright was trying to sell handheld rights Tetris to Nintendo. When Okawa asked Rogers about this, Rogers was adamant. I know damn well that Gilman doesn't have those rights. Just give me a chance to finalize this deal. Rogers finally decided to just flew to Moscow himself and headed to Moscow. In the UK, Microsoft caught wind of Nintendo's intellectual rights. Parent company Maxwell Corporation had Kevin Maxwell, the son of Robert Maxwell, to Moscow. Maxwell had connections to some romance, including Melcott rights and arcade rights. In May of 1989, all three men, Stein, Rogers, and Maxwell, flew to Moscow to get their piece of Tetris pie. Battle for Tetris was about to begin. Yeah. With all three parties, it was time to see how this battle would commence. It was time to play the game of capitalism. We start with Henk. Henk Rogers arrived in Moscow without any clue on where to go. He knew Stein was negotiating with ELORG, who were finding whereabouts. At first, he was going by playing Go with some locals, but that got him nowhere. So Rogers hired a Twitter to help him find ELORG. After the day we were running through, this is the location. Henk Rogers wanted ELORG mostly to the rights Tetris. He could feel the tension. In a place like this, undivided, he said. When Belikov was thrown to Japan, he was surprised. He didn't protocol to meet any foreigners. But Belikov was curious and decided to meet him anyways. If nothing else, having a third party better would have helped his negotiations. Belikov nudged Bobby. "Who are you?" he asked. Rogers copied Tetris, Khan, and had Belkov. "We are the biggest publisher of Tetris in the world right now," he posted. Belkov was getting confused, as he knew one had the rights to Tetris. ELORG hasn't given rights to anybody, Belkov wrote. The race, though, in the chain of licensing those rights. ELORG, Dramata, to Microsoft, to Tengen, to Bulletproof Software. Was confused. He hadn't even heard of what the hell Tengen was. Rights which were to Dramata Software, and only for using Tetris on personal computers. "Illegally selling something that you do not own," he said. "We're going to come into the hand of us. We're in danger of losing everything. Tetris, we're gonna end up in the Huskow," he said. After some discussions, Hitkov saw a meeting next day. It's time to see how the meeting was adjourned. Next day, Roger entered into a large room with a massive table. One table goes by trader Nikolai Belikov, Tetris creator Alexey Pajitnov, and several members of the ELORG team. Henk Rogers sat alone on the other side. When the pledges touched on his majority share. However, the Russians didn't know anything about it, or the game market, so he gave them a crash course on the North American game business. ELORG showed Rogers the original contract with Stein Vs Software. Rogers scanned it and found the line using all the troubles. Between the software, ELORG, saying Fortnite had rights to two different types of computers. Rogers, that's exactly that. Computer systems. To Stein, systems console was invisible. On top of that, ELORG was in pennies of Tetris, a percent of a percent. It was a horrible deal. Rogers and Taste ELORG. For handheld by sale. He offered it will be just sold. He also changed the pace with Stein. Pajitnov in particular was impressed. Rogers understood things by the former developer. The two were kindred spirits. After Rogers' pitch, Belkov moved forward with handheld rights to Tetris. Write everything down, he said. Belkov asked Rogers when he would be back in Moscow. "Either I leave with the deal or the deal. I'm not coming back," Rogers replied. After that meeting, Henk Rogers continued to talk. "Somehow we met each other almost immediately. He's a friend I was looking for in Russia. And Rogers in Moscow. Going to the city. Drank vodka and hung out with ideas in a called Tetris." Pajitnov, it was refreshing to have an old conversation with evaluation. "Nothing, yes or nothing," he said. "Friendship have a major impact on the future of Tetris." Wednesday, Rogers returned to ELORG with a one-page offer for the handheld rights for Tetris. Rogers sometimes rebooking quickly. News should Diva expire in a week. After Batros on the game initiatives, Belkov prepared for his upcoming meetings with Stein and Ken Maxwell. Using his rights to Tetris. So all the benefits, insurance got zilch. So it was clear that Tetris trader Pajitnov favored Rogers over Stein. And the insurance to play the game of capitalism. Stein entered the ELORG offices with one goal in mind: to secure the handheld rights Tetris. Rights were important. And Tengen were already selling their machines. But Nikolai Belkov had other plans. Belkov said to his original contract. "Stein, tell me honestly, what is this document called?" he asked. "An agreement," replied Stein. "It is not an agreement!" Thank God. "It's some sort of irresponsible phrases or other, transferred from party without translation for the other party." Belkov and then to the original contract. ELORG wanted money to tell penalties for late payment. Belkov refused to negotiate until Stein done online. We need to do and turn in a few days. It wasn't the friendliest of meetings, but Stein was confident he was mulled over and okay rights. Kevin Maxwell, though, was a bit of a different story. Kevin Maxwell, the son of relation Robert Maxwell. Maxwell had connections to the Russian parents, including General Secretary Mikhail Gorbachev. Microsoft was confident Maxwell would get the ruling in their favor to secure the handheld rights. Belkov during my slang content convergence asked, "What is this?" he bluffed. Maxwell had no idea. He guessed it was probably a copy of Tetris. Only more reason to ELORG to make a deal and get rid of these fakes, he said. Maxwell's situation was his doom. Belkov, nobody had a home console rights Tetris. It'd be foolish to Belkov to blow off Maxwell if he knew it was full of shit. Sure, were relevant and had deep pockets. If it wasn't a copy of Tetris, Belkov said, Belkov make a bid for home console rights too. He threw the video down. ELORG was publishing rights to Tengen corporations, reference books, and encyclopedias. In exchange, Microsoft refused refusal for any increased Tetris. Maxwell, satisfied with the arrangement, turned home, thinking that he put ends forward for Microsoft. In actuality, though, he had jeopardized everything. It's now time to see how the endgame of Tetris was formed, and to see how things would go from now. When Stein was looking at the contract ELORG. It was basically the same, plus with some extreme penalties for late payments. Paid rights was key. He goes with them when he signed the amendment. He signed it and was called to ELORG the next day. With that in the way, negotiations continued. But Belkov claimed ELORG wasn't ready to sell the handheld rights just yet. Rights though were for sale. Cost $150,000 for advanced royalty payments, with a 6-week deadline. It was a lot of money, but at least Stein could avoid any issues with Tengen and Sega's arcade version of Tetris. Stein returned and replied, but there was one key detail Stein missed in the minute. Belkov had a definition for home computer, which the computer has a processor, monitor, disk drive, board, and operating system. So it's backdated, basically stripped away console as Stein thought he would own. Large penalty payments have all been a distraction. Russians like ELORG had played the game of capitalism and won. After his meetings, Belkov Rogers to confirm that Maxwell Microsoft also won the rights to Tetris. Can't outbid Maxwell. Can give you honestly and promise to pay you for each cartridge, said Rogers. Several days later, Rogers went along with a finalized contract and walked through every detail. Sure, Rogers Nintendo enjoyed the components and Tetris, the Game Boy. After signing contract, Belkov and Rogers went further. Make a good bid for the home console rights as well. Rogers and Nintendo would be interested. Nintendo and anybody kind of did it. Rogers said, within 3 weeks. With that, the meeting was adjourned. Rogers went to Japan. He had no time to spare. It was now time for the end game, to see how this whole negotiation process would boil over. And now, let's see. As he got back to Japan, Rogers phoned Minoru Okawa, Nintendo of America News. When we had a handcuff by Tetris, usually some social issues, to bag the console rights as well. However, wishes to Vice President Howard Lincoln. Lincoln's eyes lit up. Maybe it can make us millions for Nintendo. So it'll be a sweet revenge against Atari Games. Although Nintendo P&C now suing $100 million. The suit started Atari Games frustrations, Nintendo's licensee policies, trust violations, and unfair competitions. At the same time, Atari Games branch of unlicensed games from Nintendo subsidiary Tengen. They were the first licensed games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. And this upcoming usage was their version of Tetris. Taking Tengen's rights to Tetris would hurt heavily, and Lincoln knew it. Rogers back to Moscow to make a formal offer. With him, who basically worked in the Soviet Union, and fluent in Russian. The offer with ELORG was incredible. $5 million guaranteed. Must promise to Microsoft for right of first refusal. On March 14th, 1989, sent them telex and gave them 1 day to respond with a counteroffer. Looking back, ELORG was ready to sign a deal with Nintendo. There was expensive money to take. Nintendo had to sign a contract. Lincoln Kawa knows. However, my ticket. He realizes is finding out can jeopardize everything. Nintendo released that it was going to Japan and took off from Moscow. Negotiations continued when they arrived. Lincoln was sure Atari Games would come after them. Polars said they went to help defend their rights and any litigations. Lincoln said that it was a plans for Pajitnov for Korean game. Pajitnov found the situation inappropriate. Pajitnov had given the game even a time. It belonged to the state. Belkov said that Tengen intentions. He even asked if they can make their own version of the Nintendo Entertainment System. But Nintendo declined. Between the negotiations, Microsoft provided new return message to ELORG. As far as people were concerned, thought already on the hands of rights. Only to be mistaken was all ELORG needed to hear. And on March 22nd, 1989, Nintendo and ELORG signed an agreement for home console rights to Tetris. That same day, Belkov and another telex Microsoft and by Stein. Console rights, Nintendo rights to Tetris were no longer available on Nintendo. Stein was dumbfounded. He was so focused on getting what he wanted that I forgot about everything that they wanted. Them of lying, backstabbing, and cheating. He accused publishers of colonial Russians on the Amended Contract. Maxwell sold everything over. He was burying me, burying us all, Stein said. This was consolation prize. Stein did still have the home console and arcade rights Tetris. Ken Maxwell was furious with the news. You know, was waived of agreements with you, he said in reply to ELORG. Soviet personalities involved. He wasn't bluffing. Russian government returned Nikolai Belkov searched his files, but Belkov stood his ground. Nintendo every owner agreement. When Maxwell told his father about Tetris, he reportedly, quote, went ape shit. Robert Maxwell turned all the way up to Nintendo Khrushchev, now General Secretary of the Soviet Union. His country was on the verge of collapse. Among Robert and Japanese money, Gorbachev told Maxwell, and with that, Microsoft gave up their fight to Tetris. It's time to see the remainder of the story. March 31st, 1989, Kojima facts from Lincoln, America. This is to see someone insist wanting to hold from any further entertainment, promotion, offer of a sale, or sale of Tetris for the NES or any other system. Those that belong to Nintendo. We knew we had those bastards by the balls, said Lincoln. Lincoln's 1989 official press release intends to release Tetris that summer on the NES. The next day, games military Tengen certified Benzo. We quite frankly, we're quite confused. Nintendo has known for just a year. Tengen released its rights to the game Tetris in 1988. These rights are, in Tengen's view, clear and unequivocal. But Atari Games was panicking. A week later, notification for their version of Tetris. Atari sued Nintendo for infringing on their own studio Tetris. Almost everything was at stake. The game's interest via Russell hit. Juggernaut. They assigned veteran and log to program the NES version went up. Then substantial amount of marketing and took a full page ad in USA Today. They produced 300,000 copies of Tetris. There was a huge launch party at the Russian Tea Room in New York City. On May 17th, 1989, amidst the battles, Tengen was released interest Atari Entertainment System. The protected flew off the shelves. There were 150,000 copies in weeks. Meanwhile, Howard Lincoln, back in Moscow with a team of lawyers, prepared for the upcoming legal battle. He interviewed everybody in the mode: Alexey Pajitnov, Nikolai Belikov, Alexey Pajitnov, ELORG, and the Russian Communist Sciences. They covered every copy of the contracts, Stein and ELORG. On June 15th, 1989, Tengen Nintendo opened the arguments and issued court in California. Presiding case was Judge Fern Smith, the judge lawsuits with licensed Tengen games. Both Nintendo and Atari Games filed criminal injunctions, which were selling their version of Tetris. Atari Games argued that Soft was valid. Shins were double dipping, even though the Shins never intended to sell anything other than home computer rights to Microsoft. Begun with the contract, which spanned home computer system, and the NES did not fall into that category. On June 22nd, Fern Smith received a decision. The Nintendo preliminary injunction, barring Atari Games from selling their version of Tetris. Now scheduled for later that year, in November. Huge blow to Atari Games. By then, the 100,000 units have been sold. There was a warehouse full of games. It was used to snag their own copies. They wanted the game from Blockbuster, simply kept them, happy paying the placement fee. On July 31st, 1989, Nintendo released Gameboy in North America, bundled with a copy of Tetris. The release had clear and compelling evidence. They asked Judge Fern Smith to pick one judgment. Trial then and there. Surprise, Judge Fern Smith agreed. On November 15th, 1989, she ruled Nintendo owned the home console rights Tetris. For games, was a deal, but will drive against it. They destroyed a copy of Tetris. That same month, they released the version Tetris on the NES. It was going on more than 5 million copies. The battle game was now finally over. But even then, every party involved at least made some money. Henk Rogers did predict that everybody was correct. By 2003, there was more than 100 million Game Boys. 30 of them were bundled with Tetris. When those were the clear winners, Robert Stein, Petroholobyte, Microsoft, Henk Rogers, ELORG, and Atari Games at least made some sort of money. Everyone that is, except for one, Alexey Pajitnov. By 1909, he collected nothing from Tetris and was still working in the Russian Academy of Sciences. He was married with 2 children. 1909, when his fortunes were churning around, Henk Rogers was determined to help his old friend, Pajitnov, family immigrate to this area under his own Stanford company. In 1905, Tetris expired, making Pajitnov an opportunity to finally cash in on his own creation. By that point, ELORG was now a private company, function of the Belkov. ELORG purchased percent of the rights to Tetris. Rogers and Pajitnov partnered up in the Tetris company, which is the other half. In the years, Alexey Pajitnov finally completed his videos for his game. Today, the Tetris company franchise is doing million games. It was the most become game franchise of all time. Tetris was instrumental in a lot of things. Tetris was often seen as instrumental in the collapse of the Soviet Union. The same year Tetris came out, the Berlin Wall fell down. Now, effectively bringing West Germany and East Germany back together for the first time since 1949. Today, Tetris is still seen as a great game, and it's still played by millions, including me, who still plays it to stay, and still makes great time to communicate. To this day, Tetris has become one of the most ported games. I've been able to find Tetris on phones, on calculators, and several other devices. You cannot escape this game. Even its story has a lot of things that are weirdly intentional. Tetris is a game in a story that deserves to be told. In 2023, a movie about its development and its dealings with the court case was made, starring Taron Egerton as Henk Rogers. I myself quite like the movie. While I don't admit it's perfect, I do disagree with some of the details. The movie itself serves as a great template for the franchise. Okay? I feel like the portrayals are exact, with Henk Rogers seeming as the underdog, and the Maxwells seeming like entitled businessmen who reek of cologne. Before we end this video off, I'd like to give thanks to a few people. Okay? Of course, people who made the Tetris movie themselves. They were, of course, a great inspiration. I even watched the movie in preparation for this video. I also like to thank the gaming historian himself, Norman Caruso. His video on the history of Tetris was a major source of inspiration. If you're willing to watch this podcast, please follow it on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, wherever you watch podcasts. And please, come follow me on Bluesky, where you get updates to this podcast. You can also follow me on Patreon. For $15 a month, you can watch this podcast for your own leisure. Until next time, I'm going to 145, and this is going to saying, see you all later. Ooh yeah!